Or maybe some cloud-based document app will get up to the level of a full Office suite. But I mean, unless those things happen, I by virtue of what it is, I see something else having to evolve to take its place.
Yeah, and there are some other cloud-based ones that are apparently doing pretty well, and I've seen a couple of distros using the IBM Lotus suite.
Okay.
So it's possible that that other distros might start moving toward that, even though it's not open. It's in active development at least.
Yeah, IBM's been doing some. Well, IBM's been doing some interesting thing. It's not IBM. I forget who it is. That's got a really great speech recognition thing with some open hooks. It's not entirely open source, but it is open architecture. And it hasn't worked its way into any Linux distro, but I've been waiting for some open source project to incorporate that because it's open in the way you can hook into it for text-to-speech synthesis on Linux distros. Whether or not that's going to come or not, or we're just going to have to rely on Google to provide that, is anyone's guess at this point.
I think that, in a few years, Google will have the absolute best text-to-speech recognition.
Well, yeah, no, it's like it's honestly what I'd like to see Google do that, and by virtue of the way Google is, it actually makes economic sense for Google to do this and just go, we're going to make our speech-to-text thing openly accessible so that you can hook into it and use it. And like the only tie-off to that is you're allowing voice synthesis to help make it better. I mean, there's some privacy concerns there, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure that's a bad trade-off. It depends how that works.
Yeah, and it's not like they can really go through all of them to spy on everyone, so it's...
Well,
you're a huge celebrity.
Okay, here's the thing, and here's... Okay, let's put the tinfoil hats on, and Jordan, you can tell me if I'm nuts on this, but computers really have gotten to the point where used to, once upon a time, if you were taping all that stuff and you wanted to get anything out of it, you had to go have a person go listen to all those thousands of hours of tape. Now, you can automate a computer to listen for certain keywords, whatever they may be, and if it's even remotely close, it will get flagged and transferred to an actual person to look for. And one of the tinfoil hat theory where people panic there is there's nothing to stop a three-letter agency from subpoenaing Google's database and running their analysis on it. And since the computers have gotten good enough that within an hour a computer or a server away can process tens of thousands of hours worth of tape, it's actually practical now to go through all of that stuff. It wasn't before. The man hours alone, it's like you had to know I want to listen to person XYZ. Now you really don't.
Well, if you think about it, the way that the YouTube works at this point, it actually does watch all the videos and try to generate a closed captioning system for it.
Well, no, and I forget what it is. There's some company in the European Union somewhere. I can't remember what their name is, but they've actually developed this for like the CCT cameras that are all over the UK and everywhere. But what it does is it analyzes the pictures, and it's good at analyzing for certain things. There's also a sister version of that that's been developed for things like chat roulette to look for obvious things to block. It's not that this technology exists that we should be afraid of. It's how it winds up being used. And at the end of the day, are three-letter agencies going to respect our civil liberties, or are they going to use every loophole known to man to get around them, and there really won't be anything we can do about it? And at the end of the day, if they're really going to do that, it doesn't really matter if Google's collecting it or not, because they'll do it themselves. I'm sorry. If you're naive enough to think that can't happen, you're living in a fantasy world. It's for the tinfoil hat people, I'm saying. But you know what? If they really want to listen to all that stuff from me, they've got to be bored out of their mind. Like I make jokes about that when I talk with friends. I'm like, and I just made the Homeland Security watch list. It's like, I hope they're satisfied. Anyways.
Well, I mean, what I was saying is that as far as voice recognition goes, Google is not the best right now. I've used some programs that are pretty old, actually, that can recognize my voice better than Google can. But
honestly, at this point, one of the best ones still is DragonSpeak.
Exactly. Right. Even the old versions of it is better than Google. But what I'm saying is because Google is implementing it all over YouTube, something that Dragon could just never do, and just opening it up everywhere, they're going to very quickly, few years, get the absolute best system.
Well, no, it's like one of the things they're pushing for on Android devices, and again, the tinfoil hat theory goes in, is all those voice searches are going to be turned into collecting for making the speech recognition better. It's like you're talking about, this mass sampling between YouTube videos, voice searches, everything else. By virtue of, it's one of those things, it'll turn into a monster. The more you use it, the better it'll get, and it won't take long.
It would be pretty cool, just for people that, people that are blind could be able to, it'll automatically transcribe videos. There's a lot of good reasons for it, to automatically have a system that could recognize it almost as good as a human. So.
Yeah, like the other thing you're talking about, for people who are deaf, you'd have built-in closed captioning to everything. Rather than somebody having to go back through and actually type up the CC stuff, which is largely how it's done now, you could just turn it over.
For some of your favorite tech shows on YouTube, just isn't possible.
Yeah, well, and it's like if you, one of the things you notice quickly, if you give up traditional TV and move over to computer-based or IP-based TV and everything else, is that mute to closed caption feature isn't there. Because it can't translate the stuff. It's like, and this would allow those features to come back, so that non-traditional media has all the same accessibility features as traditional media, which I think is a win-win for everyone. There's obvious trade-offs to that, but yeah, I think the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you could say that it's bad in a tinfoil hat way for voice searches to get really good, but it's still always going to be harder to track down a voice search than to track down, it's, well...
Not really, but like I said, I mean, I'm a private...
It's not hard to track down someone.
I'm a private person, but I'm not a paranoid person. If you're in the IT industry and you mess with any of this stuff, my personal opinion is a healthy drop of paranoia is a good thing. But if you imagine every horrible scenario that can happen, you will go disappear into the mountains somewhere and forbade technology indefinitely, because you'll move to the unplottable areas that Google hasn't scanned yet in the Google Earth stuff. They do still exist. They're way off in the middle of the mountains or so, but it's a pro and con thing. If you want absolute security, don't use any of this shit. If you don't want to be plottable, don't be in any town anywhere. Don't have electricity. Live entirely off the grid. That's the sign. And despite my appearance, I'm addicted. I'm too addicted to this stuff to do that. So I don't know where you sit on that, Jordan, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think you can drive yourself nuts if you go imagining all the worst case scenarios.
That's how a lot of people end up being germaphobes.
Yeah, it's like, well, they could do this, and I can't touch it. They could get my DNA. Oh my God! It's the same thing with those thumbprint readers. It's the real reason I don't like those thumbprint readers. Is my personal opinion is they're too easy to circumvent. I know they've made a lot of improvements on them, but at the end of the day, The only way to really make them as secure as you'd want would be to add the level of encryption where the natural progression of your fingers over time, because a lot of people don't realize this, your fingerprints, for a lot of people, actually change over time. Mine do that a lot more rapidly than most. I'm very beneficial in that regard, in that I found this out the hard way when I got arrested a couple of times for ID theft. I got arrested by a police department, and I got arrested 3 years later, and I found out I had different fingerprints, that my fingerprints had changed. And they said, well, fingerprints naturally change, but yours changed faster than most. I was like, okay. So, anyways, moving on. The other topic to cover on here, and we got a little into this last week, but one of the Q&A things that somebody asked me, they were trying to get, they speak English, and they want their distro to be English, but they were trying to get foreign characters to work. Like they wanted, I forget if it was Chinese or Japanese, because they were going to some foreign website or something, and they wanted stuff to work. And everything wasn't in universal HTML, and they were downloading files that were, of course, in those character names, so they would appear as the all boxes and stuff on them. This got me thinking along the lines of, you know, as far as a good user-friendly distro, because there's a real pro and con on this. Ubuntu includes every language known to man, but as a result, they don't include a lot of other things that could be a hell of a lot more useful to a hell of a lot more people. Because they just run out of space on the ISO. I mean, that's the first thing on that list. It's like languages. Do you think it's better to just include either one language by default with the ability to add all the other languages, or should you include every language known to man with the option to remove them?
Well, that's part of Ubuntu's philosophy to include all those languages. I mean, I can see Ubuntu, it just... Yeah, for Ubuntu to do it, I'm okay with that.
What about just an average user-friendly distro? That's one of the ways in which I'd say PC Linux OS is very weak. By default, it's English only. They have that add places thing where you can add all of those languages. It's 4 clicks away, but you have to be able to follow English enough to be able to click that or follow the tutorial for that to get it into German or Spanish or Korean or whatever other language is you're looking for. It's like, where do you stand on that, Jordan?
That's actually one of those things I would like to see. Well, for example, when you're starting up a distro like Red Hat, like Debian, I believe even Fedora does it. It's been a while since I've done a Fedora install. When you're starting up, it actually says, what do you want to install? Arch does it. It says, do you want a web server? Do you want a desktop? Do you want a development environment? If, as a part of that, you could say, I want these languages, and have it connect to the network and actually pull those down. Because they shouldn't be that large. I mean, a few megabytes usually, and considering the amount of people that do have broadband nowadays, in order to get an ISO, you have to have a decent connection speed anyway. It would almost, I don't know, it basically have something that pops up and says, which one of these languages do you recognize? And, I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, it'd be useful if it did it at start like that. I think that's actually the best way to do it. The only
that would require the network connection.
Yeah, that's the thing. In some cases, depending when the distro asks it for you, and you know, it's been a while since I've actually installed PCLin from scratch. I know at one point they changed this. One of the things, I don't know if PCLin still does this. Initially, the first thing it did was ask you to set up a network connection so it could do stuff like that before you even did anything, like before you even logged into the live CD. I think they've actually changed that so that it doesn't, I don't know if it actually still asks you for that initially. And in some cases, on some distros, that can cause a problem, especially if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is encrypting your Wi-Fi connection. If you're one of these really paranoid people that both encrypts and MAC address restricts it, and you're doing this on a system you've never booted into, you may not know what the MAC address is of it yet, so you haven't added it yet. And that can cause some problems there.